Welcome to the Wealth Horizon podcast, where we explore the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities shaping the financial industry today. In each episode, we bring you insightful conversations with industry leaders, sharing practical, actionable strategies to help advisors deepen relationships and meet growth goals. I hope you enjoy. Today, I am thrilled to have Mel Lagomasino as my inaugural guest. And who better to have on a podcast to be launched during Women's Month? Mel has worked with some of the wealthiest families in the world for more than 3 decades. She serves as the CEO and managing partner of We Family Offices and is a recognized leader in the wealth management industry, sort of a celebrity. And you are the founder of the Institute for the Fiduciary Standard. Actually, let me start over there. She serves as the CEO and managing partner of We Family Offices and is a recognized leader in the wealth management industry and is a founder of the Institute for the Fiduciary Standard. Before founding We, Mel served as CEO of GenSpring Family Offices. And prior to that, she served as chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Private Bank. So quite a celebrity, Mel.
No, not at all.
I'm so glad to have you on. So thank you for joining. We've been working together for about 20 years, and it has been such an honor to get to know you and get to work with you. I've been working with you since I was a little baby, really.
I know. You didn't have any children then. And
I
how
didn't
old
even
are your
have any
children?
children.
How old are your children then? Now.
So I didn't have any, and now I have a 14-year-old, two 12-year-olds, and a 9-year-old. So it's been a long time.
It
So I'm
has.
so glad that you're here with us. And of course, it's Women's Month. And so I thought, who better to have on this podcast to kick us off than you, as I've learned so much from you. And I've just loved working with you over the years. Um, so I
I'm
want,
honored, Rosemary.
thank you, Mel. Um, so I want to get started with, I just want to get into a little brief background. You know, we know that you came from Cuba. My father also came from Cuba, so that was an immediate point of connection that I felt with you. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey here, and then what led you into wealth management. I know that you sort of had a different start to your career, so I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, when we left Cuba in 1960, and I was 11 then, um, we left everything behind and had to start over. And 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 it's not when something like that happens, it's not just about financial assets. It's you leave your whole lifestyle behind, and you actually break a lot of ties with people that you love because they don't necessarily go to the same places that you do when you leave. So the importance of family, and the family being able to stay together, I think, is so important. And then the importance of having the resources to be able to start over again and to be able to do the things that are important to the family are so important. And so that really connects a lot with what happened to me in wealth management, because when I started in the banking business, and I started in the private bank, and I started really supporting families from Chile at that time who had gone through something similar than Cuba, I always thought, boy, if my family had had somebody like me that could have helped them, then maybe their lives, my family's lives, would have been a lot easier. We would have been able to maybe stay more together. We would have been able to start over more successfully, etc. So for me, there was always a mission around what we did that was really about supporting these families who had worked so hard to create their financial livelihood to be able to keep on going and keep supporting their families. So anyway, when I started at Citibank, and I became totally in love with the business and absolutely connected fantastically with the clients. And I think one of the things in terms of being successful is first you have to love what you do so that you can do it for a long time and put in a lot of hours and do it with passion. Um, And you have to feel that you're making a difference. It has to be meaningful to you. And so I think on both those levels, the work that I've done has been very meaningful to me, and it still is.
Awesome. I would echo that, and I think that it is reflected in everything that you do, that you love what you do passionately. Um, so I would love to know, you've had an extraordinary career in wealth management. You've led some of the most prominent firms in the world. As a female in the industry, I would love to hear if you've ever experienced any challenges. I know you've been very vocal about being a female being an advantage for you, and I'd love to for you to explore that.
Well, when I started out, and it was at Citibank, and I would go down to South America, the other people that were dealing with clients in the competition were all these guys who were 36 long and gray pinstripe suits. But I was different. I was a young woman, and I was wearing brighter colors, and clearly I was more memorable. And so let's just take it as that. I mean, that was one of the advantages, that was that I was more memorable. But the other thing was, and I do think this is kind of a woman's, I I hate to say this is gender specific, but my experience has been that we're we can be much more involved in listening as opposed to using the time we have with a client to convince them about how smart we are. And so I think we might be better at asking questions, as opposed to putting out, particular information to show just how much we know and how smart we are. We're not in that kind of competition. At least I never felt I was. So I actually felt that one of my strengths, and the clients would tell me this, was that I had a better understanding of what was important to them. But the reason I did was because I listened and I asked a lot of questions. And it was important. The answers to those questions were important to me. Um, it's not like you just ask a question to ask a question. Is you are deeply interested and seek to understand in your listening. That I think makes all the difference. And then when you do, then you can try to solve for whatever the client is concerned about.
And I think, at that time, that was not very common, right? I think there's a lot more emphasis on all the other aspects of wealth and being interested in the entire picture. But I don't think that was the case when you started, and I think that was probably very profound for some of those people that you were working with, that you were able to sort of focus on everything that was important to them and not just investment returns and jargon and the things that were so traditional in those relationships.
Yes, and along the way, um, I realized that the importance of the women in the family. So it's interesting because even though it was South America and it was the late 70s or the early 80s, the women had a really important role to play in some of this decision making. Although it was more in the background. But I think as because I was a woman and because I could connect with these women in a different way, engaging them in the conversation so that they could typically help support their husbands in the decision making was actually a really good thing. And the guys felt more supported and the women felt more included. So all of that works.
Absolutely. And now it's become so, I don't want to say the word commonplace, but it has become much more mainstream, right? To focus on the female and the relationship.
We've been talking for more than 10 years, Rosemary. I think probably since I know you that the big wealth transfer that everybody was talking about was not going to go to the next generation. It was likely to go to the women because men tend to marry younger women and we outlive men by about 9 years. So typically, where was the decision making going to go? It was going to go from the patriarch or the husband to the spouse. And so this is what's happening now. The amount of women that are making decisions about their financial lives is much, much greater than it ever was.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you wrote the role transition paper. 12 years
Yeah,
ago, right?
yeah,
And it was
yeah.
before everyone was talking about it.
I know, I know.
Um, Trailblazing. It's great. So I would love to hear, we talk a lot about role transition. We talk about a lot about the women becoming a more prominent focus in the relationship. How do you feel the wealth management industry is doing at keeping up with that demand and that shift?
I think they're starting to at least become aware of the fact that women have a lot of decision making. First of all, they have a lot of power. They have a lot of control over their own financial assets, and they're going to have decision making rights. So I think the industry is much more aware of it. How they're doing with it, I don't know. I still find from new women clients that we get that whoever's been advising them really hasn't been explaining to them the implications of their decisions as well as they could. Um, and there's still a lot of jargon, and there's still women that sort of feel that they're not included in the conversation in a way that's relevant to them. I think the most important thing with making financial decisions is that you understand the implications of those decisions. There's no right or wrong. It's always trade-offs. But I think the important thing for an advisor is to be able to explain to the client, if you do A, here are the implications. If you do B, here are the implications. Where do you feel the most comfortable with A or B? Do you understand? So that when you, as the client, as the owner, are making the decisions, you feel that you're making that decision with confidence and competence, and you have all the information you need to have to make that decision. Otherwise, these financial decisions create huge anxiety, whether it's about a mortgage or it's an investment or whatever it is. I mean, financial decisions are huge anxiety creators.
Absolutely. I can imagine when you're talking to some of these females in the relationship, sort of a light bulb goes off and relief kind of comes over them and they're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I get that. I get it. I'm cool with that. Yeah,
Yeah."
I understand. Yeah, I can live with that,
Just that
right?
information is so powerful.
And it has to be, I think, explained in a way that is relevant to them. So, for example, I find that a lot of women, rather than look at a lot of financial charts, I mean, if you can visualize it with them, with different um, visuals, it's much easier for them to understand. I mean, we all learn differently. So I think also, some people start at the very lowest detail, and then you have to help them from the ground up. And some people start from the top, the strategic, and then you have to explain how you got to that. So I think you also have to understand, how do people learn? How do they listen? Um, and because otherwise they won't feel confident making the decisions.
Do you feel that women learn differently than men, or do you just feel that maybe men aren't as comfortable saying that they don't understand something as women might do?
I was actually talking to this with one of my male partners yesterday. I said, I think the difference is that men think they're supposed to know the answers, so they don't ask the questions. And the women don't think that they're supposed to know, so they do ask the questions. And as a result, I think they have the ability to make much better financial decisions.
And I think there's a lot of difference. There's been a lot of talk about how women are better investors than men, and I don't want to make this about women versus men because that's not the object. But they do invest differently than men. They're more cautious. They're more risk averse. They make decisions differently, and so I think there's something to be said for how they take in information and then the actions that come out of that. It's just different.
Well, I would take it just a little differently. So with most, and this is terrible to make these generalizations, but I think with a lot of guys, they want to be feel that they are very smart, that they are the smartest guys, that that they are good as their golf buddy in terms of making investment decisions. So that's why they take more risk. It's more about how do I win? How do I make sure, I'm like the best in terms of this and feel really smart about it. The women are different. I hardly ever find that with a woman. I usually find that a woman investor says, "What is this for?" And given what this is for, what the objective is, how to make sure I put it to work in a way that I'm comfortable that achieves my objectives. That tends to take less risk by definition. And so I think that's a little bit of where they start out from.
Mhm. Mhm. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that other approach.
No, it's just different.
It's very different. Um, you sit on the boards of major corporations, Walt Disney Company and Coca-Cola. Um, I'm curious to know, what is it like to be a female in the boardroom of those companies?
Well, very different today than what it was when I started. I have a picture in my office of the Coke board. I'm trying to think what year it was. It was probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago. And there's like 16 board members and there's two of us women. And today, half of the board is women at Coke.
Mm,
And so today women are mainstream. When
mhm.
I started out, and at Disney, it was always, I went on the Disney board much later than on the Coke board. By the time I got to the Disney board, it was also just about half and half.
Okay.
So I think we've made huge, huge progress.
That's awesome, because I think that, and do you feel that that's because of it's mandated, or do you feel that it has just been a natural progression?
I think it's been a natural progression. And I think when you think, so both my companies are companies where guess who's making the buying decision? Who's making the who's making the decision to go to Disney World?
Right.
Who's making the decision to buy the beverages for the family? I mean, the decision makers for consumer products and consumer experiences are usually the women in the family. So I think that it's important to have a representation on the board that is consistent with who your customers are.
Absolutely. And I think that that trickles over also into wealth management, right? So females, but women are in general more in control of the finances. They manage all the household finances. They make the day-to-day spending decisions. So it makes sense that they would be at the front of these relationships, but they're not yet. So it's
But I
just
would distinguish between the household spending decisions and the
mm,
investment decision.
big
That's the
difference.
piece where I think we're moving into much more competence and confidence with women.
I would 100% agree. Um, we've talked a lot about women in um, as a new client, right? The face of the ultra high net worth family. We've talked a lot about the evolution there as a primary focus in the relationship. How do you feel? What advice would you give for women as they are in the wealth management industry? These female professionals. What advice would you give them about being a female in the wealth management industry?
I would say be authentic, be yourself. I think we have real strengths. We connect differently. And so I think use that. Use the ideally the EQ and the importance that most of us put on the value of relationships to build those relationships with your clients. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the clients. And it really is all about those relationships. And so the ability to be able to have those very deep professional relationships where the family is clear, your client is clear that you really care about them and you really care about the outcome and that they can count on you. I think I think that's the ticket.
I work for a lot of wealth management companies, and the majority of them are vastly unequal in terms of women to men. There's many more men than women. It is still very much a male dominated industry. Um, I think that there's a ton of opportunity for women in wealth management, but yet I don't see a lot of females in wealth management, and I certainly don't see them in leadership roles very often in wealth management. Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I mean, I'm very proud of the women that we have in our organization. Um, I don't know because I think it's a wonderful career. And I actually, in terms of the wealth management space, there are some really fantastic women out there and have been some really fantastic women out there. But I don't know. I think maybe they're a little spooked by the idea of finance and investments. It's still more of a male space, but it's not really.
No, I don't think so. I think it's amazing.
No. Yeah, of course.
I think it's a land of opportunity here for
I
women.
agree with you. I especially because of what we're talking about,
Yeah.
especially because you're gonna have this transition of all of these financial assets into the hand of women decision makers.
And I think that firms are realizing now more than they ever have been, they are waking up and they're realizing they need a female perspective. They need female advisors. They need female relationship managers for all of their female clients and for this target audience, these new women wealth creators and inheritors and divorcees, and these women who are now suddenly in control of the relationship and they don't have a female perspective because they don't have a female advisor. So I personally am encouraging my daughters to to follow that
Good,
path. There's a
good.
lot of opportunity.
There is. But, when you think about what we do, for example, there's usually not one decision maker. It's a family, and families are comprised of men and women. And so your ability to feel the team, that has both men and women, I think is the ideal space.
Yeah, and the
Ju
firms that are able to speak to both of those people, right? Both men and
Right.
women, and who have a mix are the firms that you see that have the loudest voice, and they're out there, they're growing. I think that speaks volumes.
I hope so. I think the other thing, that's important, it's not just about gender, but about age, right? Because particularly in our space, there's going to be a transition from one generation to the next. So the ability to field teams that are composed of older, more experienced advisors with younger, more less experienced, but more tech savvy advisors that can connect better with the rising generation, I think is also really important.
Mhm. I think so too. Both from the I think that you see it both from the families, right? So the families, they have these sort of rising leaders in their families that are about to inherit all of this wealth. And I think that there's a place for them. And I think that we are realizing now how important that is, both from an advisory perspective and a family's perspective. Well,
Absolutely.
last question before we wrap up. I would love to know, we talked about the advice you have for women coming in wealth management. I would love to know what advice would you have for yourself, um, say 40 years ago?
I don't know because I followed my heart and I still follow my heart. And so I don't know that I would have done anything differently. I don't know that I could have moved any faster or any slower. It just organically happened. I never thought about where I wanted to be 5 years from now. I only thought about how can I be the best that I can be and help the families I serve, and then the rest just sorta happened. So, for me, for myself, I don't know, I just still to this day, I just follow my heart.
That's amazing. That's a huge blessing to have no regrets and just have a lot of confidence in that.
Zip regrets.
That's good. All right. What have we not talked about that you feel we should have talked about?
I don't know, I think for the next generation, for every generation has its challenges, but I think for the next generation, the advent of technology and how it's going to change, the space that we work in is going to be significant. And I think staying ahead of it, I think trying to figure out, our willingness to change as people, it's very hard to change. And I'm one of those people that believes that you only change when not changing is more painful than changing. But I think what we have to be is be very open to the incredible advantages that we're going to have, and they just the leapfrogging that we're going to be able to do with technology, and it's going to be kind of scary, but I think we got to be open to it and go with it. And that is, I think, going to change the next chapter in wealth management.
Oh my gosh, no question. I mean, AI is coming for all of us, and I'm hoping
Yeah.
it's not like the Terminator version of AI. I'm hoping it's sort of a softer, gentler version of AI.
You might be talking to an avatar instead of an advisor. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, tech and staying open to change, I think that's going to be really important and challenging for the next generation.
100%. Well, Mel, thank you so much for
Thanks,
joining
Rosemary.
me. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I love working with you.
Well, thank you for all the great work and partnership we've had for all these years. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.